What would you do if all you had left was a broken down car and a child to feed? This is the incredible true story of a single mother, a rusty old car, and a love so powerful it defied every obstacle. She didn't have money, she didn't have support, but what she had was a heart full of determination and a little boy who believed she could do anything. Through cold nights sleeping in the back seat and days chasing jobs that barely paid enough to survive, she never gave up. And that old car, it became a symbol of hope and the beginning of something no one expected. If this story touches your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that love and grit can move mountains. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because we have many more real-life stories that will move you, shock you, and inspire you. They say when life closes every door sometimes, just sometimes, it leaves a window cracked open. For Sarah, that window was an old beat-up sedan from 1998. Rust clung to its doors like scars of battles fought. The engine coughed like an old man on his last breath, and the radio only played static. But to her, it wasn't just a car. It was a lifeline. Sarah had just turned 28 when her world shattered. Her husband walked out without a word, leaving her alone with a 2-year-old son, a stack of unpaid bills, and no job. No family nearby, no savings, just that car and a heart full of fear. The first night he left, she sat behind the wheel in silence. Her son, little Ethan, was asleep in the back seat, clutching his stuffed lion. The house was cold and empty, and so was her heart. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I don't know how we're going to make it, but we will." And somehow she did. Sarah took any work she could find, cleaning offices, waiting tables, even delivering groceries. She woke up before dawn, strapped Ethan into his car seat, and prayed the car would start. Sometimes it did. Sometimes she had to bang the starter with a wrench, but she never let Ethan see her worry. She smiled through the oil-stained hands, the sore back, and the days with no sleep. That car became their second home. When rent was due and she didn't have enough, they slept in it. When Ethan was sick, she'd park outside emergency rooms and hold him in her lap through the night because they had no insurance. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for pity. She kept going. Because quitting was never an option. People often saw her and judged. A woman in a ragged sweater, smelling like grease and exhaustion, holding a toddler's hand in the grocery store. But what they didn't see was the fire burning inside her, the unshakable belief that she would give her son a better life, no matter what it took. One evening, the car finally gave out on a stretch of highway just outside town. Smoke billowed from the hood, and Sarah stood there, hands trembling, trying to figure out what to do. A man in his 60s pulled over, a retired mechanic named Joe. He didn't ask many questions. He just opened the hood, looked at the worn-out engine and said, "Looks like this old girl's seen better days." Sarah laughed for the first time in weeks. Joe didn't just fix the car. He listened. He gave her a warm cup of coffee, and he told her something she would never forget. "You're not weak. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. That little boy in the back seat, he's going to remember his mom never gave up, and one day he's going to be proud as hell." That night, as she drove away, engine humming quietly for the first time in months, Sarah looked at Ethan in the rearview mirror. He was smiling, his lion tucked under his chin, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. That moment wasn't the end of the road, it was the beginning. The beginning of something no one saw coming. After that night on the side of the highway, something shifted in Sarah. It wasn't just the engine that had been revived, it was her spirit. She began stopping by Joe's small auto shop on weekends, not to ask for help, but to watch. She'd sit on an old milk crate in the corner with Ethan on her lap, eyes wide as Joe worked on engines, with the ease of a man who had spent his life listening to the language of machines. One Saturday, Joe turned to her and said, "You know, you've got a good eye. Want to learn?" She blinked. "Me? Fix cars?" He grinned. "Why not? You've already kept that old sedan alive longer than most would. That takes heart and hands." At first, she hesitated. She had always believed she wasn't technical. She had no formal education, and society never told women like her that engines could be part of their future. But then she thought about Ethan, about the kind of mother she wanted him to see. So she said yes. Week after week, she learned how to change oil, how to check spark plugs, how to listen to an engine and hear what it needed. Her hands grew calloused, her clothes stained with grease, but her confidence grew with every bolt she tightened. Joe became a mentor, not just in mechanics, but in life. He didn't pity her, he respected her. He saw her grit, her focus, her willingness to learn. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt seen. One afternoon, as she stood under a car hoisted on a lift, Joe tossed her a wrench and said, "You ever think about doing this for real?" She looked at him, puzzled. "Like, work here?" He shook his head. "No, open your own shop. You've got what it takes, and I've got tools I won't be using forever." The idea sounded outrageous. A single mom with no degree, no money, and a child to raise, start a business? But sometimes the most powerful thing someone can give you is belief. So she started saving. Every spare dollar, every tip from late-night shifts, every extra hour spent fixing up neighbors' cars in the driveway. And eventually, she found a small rundown garage for rent on the edge of town. She called it Second Chance Auto. The name wasn't just about cars, it was about life. The grand opening was humble. A homemade banner, a coffee pot in the corner, and a toddler sitting in the waiting area with crayons. But people came. Maybe it was her story, maybe it was her honesty. Maybe it was the fact that when Sarah fixed your car, you knew she poured her whole soul into it. As months passed, business grew. She hired a single mom from her old neighborhood, then another. She created a safe, supportive space where women could learn trades, earn a living, and rebuild their confidence, just like she had. And through it all, the old sedan still sat out front. Not for sale, not for show, but as a reminder of where it all began. One rainy afternoon, a news reporter came by after hearing about her shop. As the cameras rolled, they asked, "What kept you going, Sarah? What made you believe you could do all this?" She smiled, looked at the camera and simply said, "Love. And the belief that rock bottom isn't the end, it's where we learn how to rise." Today, Ethan is 9. He tells his friends that his mom is stronger than Iron Man, and he's not wrong. He doesn't remember the cold nights in the car, or the hunger, or the broken beginnings. What he remembers is the sound of engines, the warmth of his mother's laughter, and the feeling that, no matter what, they were never stuck. Because his mom never stopped driving forward. It had been 5 years since Sarah turned the key and opened the doors of Second Chance Auto. What started as a garage with borrowed tools and second-hand parts had grown into something much bigger, a community, a movement, a beacon of hope for people who had almost given up on themselves. Sarah didn't just fix cars anymore, she fixed lives. Each month she hosted free car clinics for single moms. She taught them how to check their oil, change a tyre, and talk to mechanics with confidence. For many women, it was the first time they'd felt power in their hands, literal and symbolic. "Every woman should know what's under the hood," Sarah would say with a grin, "and what she's made of." She also started a small training program in the evenings, offering classes in basic auto repair to women from shelters and low-income housing. She called it Keys to Confidence. The goal wasn't just employment, it was empowerment. Joe, her old mentor, had officially retired, but still stopped by every Friday. He'd sit on a folding chair near the back of the shop, sipping coffee and watching Sarah teach, pride etched into every wrinkle of his face. "You've built more than a business," he told her one evening. "You've built a bridge." Sarah looked around the shop, at the young women in overalls, laughing as they learned, at Ethan in the corner doing homework on a tool bench, at the photos on the wall of every woman who had graduated from her program, and she realized he was right. But even with the growth and recognition, Sarah stayed grounded. She still drove the same old car. People offered to buy her a new one, community leaders, customers, even Ethan, when he won a school essay contest about his mom and the prize was $500. But Sarah always said the same thing: "This car got us here, it stays." One winter morning, something unexpected happened. A man in a suit walked into the shop, holding a briefcase and wearing an expensive coat. He introduced himself as Marcus Hayes, a representative from a national foundation that supported women in trades. He had heard about Second Chance Auto, read about Sarah in a local paper, watched a clip of her on a small-town news channel. And now he had a proposal. "We'd like to partner with you," he said, to help you expand, take your program across the state, maybe even the country. Sarah was speechless. She had never dreamed that far ahead. Her dream was always simple: to survive, to raise her son, to help a few others do the same. But now, she saw what it could become. She asked for a week to think. That night, she and Ethan sat on the hood of the old sedan in the garage, eating microwave popcorn and looking at the string lights she'd hung across the beams. The shop smelled like motor oil and hope. "Do you think we could do it?" she asked him. Ethan, now 10, leaned against her shoulder. "You always say we don't give up. So yeah, I think we can." And with that, she said yes. The following year was a whirlwind. Sarah travelled to speak at events, shared her story with young women across the country, and worked with non-profits to replicate her training model. Second Chance Auto became a symbol, not just of repair, but of renewal. But no matter how big things got, Sarah never forgot the cold nights in the car. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. So she made a promise to herself: no woman who walked through her doors would feel alone. She kept a framed photo above her desk. It was a picture Ethan had drawn years ago, just a scribble of a car with 2 stick figures inside and a sun in the corner. Underneath, in a child's shaky handwriting, it read, "Me and Mom. We never stopped driving." 2 years had passed since Second Chance Auto partnered with the National Foundation. What started in a dusty garage on the edge of town had blossomed into 7 branches across the state, each one run by women who had once sat exactly where Sarah had, afraid, unsure, but unwilling to give up. Sarah now split her time between managing her original shop and mentoring new program directors. She still taught classes when she could, still got her hands greasy, still showed up at 6 a.m. with a coffee in one hand and a socket wrench in the other. Fame didn't change her. Purpose grounded her. But one spring morning, something happened that brought Sarah back to a place she hadn't visited in years. Not physically, but emotionally. It started with a knock on her office door. A young woman stood there, no more than 22, with tired eyes and a baby carrier in her arms. She wore an oversized hoodie, her shoes falling apart at the soles. Behind her, parked just outside the shop, was a battered minivan trailing smoke. "Are you the one who helps women?" she asked. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Come in." Her name was Jamie. She had fled an abusive relationship, sleeping in her van for days with her 6-month-old daughter, and heard, through a Facebook group, that there was a place in town that might help. Sarah listened. She offered her a warm meal, a safe place to sleep, and eventually a spot in the next training cohort. But more than that, she offered her something else: hope. Over the next few weeks, Jamie reminded Sarah so much of herself that it was almost painful. The way she tried to be strong, even when her voice cracked. The way she held her baby like her arms were armor. The way she kept saying, "I'm fine," when she wasn't. One night, Sarah found Jamie in the garage, alone, crying quietly next to her broken-down van. The baby was asleep inside. Jamie looked up, ashamed. "I'm sorry. I don't know if I can do this. I'm not like you." Sarah knelt beside her and said the words that had once saved her. "You don't have to be strong all the time. You just have to keep showing up." She placed a gentle hand on the hood of Jamie's van. "You see that old car over there?" she said, pointing to her own sedan in the corner of the shop. "That got me through every storm. It didn't matter how rusty it was or how often it broke down. What mattered is it always got back on the road." Jamie looked at her, eyes wide. "You really slept in your car?" Sarah smiled. "Many nights. But that car wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning." Jamie wiped her tears and laughed through her sniffles. "Guess I've got my own beginning too." From that day on, Jamie threw herself into the program. She learned fast. She asked questions. She worked late. She volunteered to help new trainees. And within 6 months, she was offered a job, not just as a technician, but as a mentor. Sarah watched her with quiet pride, the same way Joe used to watch her. One afternoon, while packing up tools after class, Jamie approached Sarah with a small envelope. "I've been saving a little," she said nervously. "It's not much, but I want to fix up the van. I want to make it safe, reliable, maybe even start giving rides to other moms who need help getting here." Sarah didn't cry often, but that day she did, because that moment, more than any award, any TV interview, or partnership, meant she had done what she set out to do. She had created a ripple, a legacy. One woman helped, one life changed, and from that another spark caught fire. Later that night, Sarah sat alone in her office. She looked at the old sedan through the garage window. It was still there, faded, worn, but shining in the moonlight like a quiet hero. She walked out, opened the driver's door and slid into the seat. The scent of old leather and memories filled her lungs. She ran her hand over the steering wheel and whispered, "We did it." And for the first time in years, she turned the key. The engine coughed, then rumbled to life. It still ran, just like her. Because the road isn't always smooth, sometimes it's cracked and full of potholes. But if you keep driving, with love in your heart and fire in your soul, you'll get somewhere beautiful. And maybe, just maybe, you'll help someone else get there too. The years rolled on as they always do. Time passed like miles on an open highway. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. Sarah was now in her early 40s. Ethan had just turned 16. He was taller than her now, voice deeper, with hands that looked more and more like a mechanic's every day. After school, he would head straight to the shop, toss his backpack by the tool bench and get to work beside his mom. It wasn't forced, it was tradition. He grew up here. He grew up with the sound of socket wrenches and women laughing between lessons. He grew up watching his mom build a business, not with capital, but with compassion. Watching her lead with strength and kindness, watching her change lives one oil change at a time. Ethan didn't know what he wanted to be yet, but he knew this: whatever he did, he wanted it to matter. And one day he came to her with an idea. "Mom," he said, "what if we started fixing up old cars and giving them away?" She blinked. To who? To people who need a second chance, like we once did. Sarah sat still for a long time after that. Her mind wandered back to those cold nights in her old sedan, the way it felt to be stuck, but not defeated. How a running car could mean the difference between getting to work or losing everything. A week later, the Second Chance Garage giveaway was born. Every quarter, the shop would take in donated vehicles, repair them with love, and give them to women who were trying to rebuild. Mothers leaving shelters, young people aging out of foster care, veterans starting over. No red tape, no judgment, just help. The first recipient was a woman named Tanya. She was 38, a survivor of domestic violence, and had just completed the shop's training program. She held the keys in her trembling hands and cried into Sarah's shoulder. "You have no idea what this means," she whispered. But Sarah did, because once someone handed her a second chance too. No strings, just grace. That night, Sarah and Ethan sat under the stars, backs resting against the old sedan. The one that started it all. "It's time, isn't it?" Ethan asked softly. Sarah nodded. They both knew what he meant. The next morning, she called a friend from the local museum, one who had been asking for years to display her old car as a symbol of perseverance and hope. She finally said yes. Before the tow truck arrived, she sat in the car one last time, ran her fingers over the worn steering wheel. The memories rushed in, lullabies sung to Ethan in the back seat. Tears wiped away before job interviews, the late-night drives when she didn't know where to go but knew she had to keep moving. She whispered, "Thank you," and closed the door. As the truck drove off, Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You know, Mom," he said, "that car didn't carry us. You did." Sarah laughed through the tears. "We carried each other." The old sedan now rests in a local exhibit, surrounded by photos of Sarah's journey, letters from women she helped, and a simple plaque that reads, "This is not just a car, this is a beginning." And outside, in the still busy shop, another young woman walks in, scared, exhausted, clutching her child. She asks, "Is this the place that helps people?" And just like always, Sarah smiles and says, "Yes, it is. You're right on time." It had been nearly 20 years since Sarah first turned a wrench in that dusty little garage, heart heavy with fear but hands steady with resolve. Now, the garage bustled like a small city, whirring tools, bursts of laughter, music from the radio bouncing off the steel walls. But it wasn't Sarah turning the wrenches anymore. It was Ethan. At 24, he was now the lead technician and co-director of Second Chance Auto. He carried the same fire his mother had once carried, but with a quiet confidence that was entirely his own. His hands were stained with grease, but his mind was sharp, and his heart, just like his mom's, was always tuned to those who needed help the most. Sarah had taken a step back, not to retire, but to breathe. She spent more time mentoring, speaking at high schools, and writing the book she never thought she'd write, Driven: How a Rusty Car Saved My Life. One morning, Sarah sat at the back of the garage with her coffee, watching Ethan lead a group of trainees. Most of them young women, one of them a refugee from Ukraine, another a high school dropout trying to turn her life around. It made Sarah smile. Different faces, same story. Every one of them chasing hope under the hood of a broken car. Later that afternoon, Ethan came to her with a letter in hand. "You should read this," he said, grinning. It was from a woman named Alyssa, who had been part of the garage giveaway program 5 years earlier. She had received a beat-up Toyota Camry that Sarah's team had restored. In her letter, Alyssa wrote, "The car you gave me got me to college classes, then job interviews, and eventually to my first day working at a hospital. I'm now a licensed nurse. And guess what? I just bought my first car with my own money. But I still keep the keys to the old Camry on my keychain. Not because I drive it, but because it reminds me where I came from and who believed in me." Sarah wiped away a tear. "I remember her. She barely spoke during orientation. Now look at her." "She mentioned you in a podcast," Ethan added. "Called you a quiet legend." Sarah laughed. "I've been called worse." That evening, Ethan brought up another idea. "What if we build a mobile version of the shop?" he said. "Like a van with tools and a few volunteers. We could visit rural towns, shelters, anywhere people don't have access to help." Sarah looked at him, proud beyond words. "You think we can do it?" He grinned. "I learned from the best." 6 months later, the Second Chance mobile garage was on the road. A brightly painted van, outfitted with tools, equipment, and 2 travelling mechanics, one of whom was Jamie, the woman Sarah once found crying by her van years ago. Now she was a lead trainer, rolling into forgotten places, bringing with her not just repairs but possibilities. They visited farming towns, battered women's shelters, community centres, wherever people had wheels but no way forward. Back at the main garage, Ethan oversaw the expansion of a new youth mentorship wing, where teens at risk of dropping out could come learn trade skills. The slogan on the front door read, "Build your future, one bolt at a time." Sarah often wandered the halls quietly, her heart full. She had once built something out of desperation, out of survival, but now it was something greater, a legacy built on compassion, resilience, and the belief that no one is ever too broken to be put back together. One night, she found a note taped to the break room fridge. In blocky teenage handwriting, it said, "Thank you for seeing me when I didn't even see myself. I think this place might have saved my life." She folded the note, tucked it into her pocket, and stepped outside. The stars above were quiet, endless. Somewhere in the distance, the mobile garage was probably pulling into a town no one had ever heard of, where someone just needed a reason to believe again. Sarah smiled. The road never really ends. It was a sunny autumn afternoon when Sarah stood in front of the crowd, her hand resting lightly on the wooden podium. A warm breeze rustled the yellow leaves above, and the scent of engine oil mixed gently with the crisp air. Behind her was the newly completed Second Chance Training Centre, a state-of-the-art facility built from the ground up with grants, donations, and countless volunteer hours. But it wasn't the building that made Sarah emotional, it was the faces. Hundreds of them, women, men, teens, veterans, single parents, some holding children, some holding hands, all standing in silent gratitude for the woman who had given them more than just tools or training. She had given them dignity. "My name is Sarah Henderson," she began, her voice steady but soft. "But this story was never just about me." She glanced at Ethan, who stood off to the side, his arms crossed, tears in his eyes. "I once lived in my car," she continued. "I had nothing but a baby boy, a beat-up sedan, and the will to keep going. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I couldn't stay stuck. That journey, painful as it was, taught me the most important truth of all." She paused. "That sometimes our worst moments are not the end, they're the spark." Applause rose, not polite or obligatory, but real, like thunder rolling in gratitude. After the ceremony, Sarah stepped away from the crowd and walked toward the small glass room in the back of the training centre. Inside was a modest display, a faded photo of her and baby Ethan, the first wrench she ever owned, and a rusted license plate that read Second Chance. And in the centre, behind a velvet rope, sat the car. Yes, that car. The old sedan had been returned from the museum on a special request. Ethan had arranged it for the ceremony, cleaned up, polished, preserved. Sarah smiled at it like an old friend. So many years had passed, but somehow the sight of it still made her chest ache in the best way. Jamie walked in, carrying her now teenage daughter, both of them smiling. "You changed my life, Sarah," she said softly. Sarah shook her head. "You changed it. I just handed you a wrench." Later that evening, Sarah sat on the back steps of the training centre with Ethan beside her. The sunset stretched across the sky like golden silk. "I've been thinking," she said, watching the colours shift. "Dangerous," Ethan joked, nudging her. "I think it's time I step back," she continued. "Not disappear, just let you lead now. You've earned it." Ethan looked at her, his expression a mix of pride and sadness. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I started this so we'd survive, but you've turned it into something that helps others thrive. That's legacy, Ethan. That's the dream." A long silence hung between them, comfortable, full. Then Ethan stood up and held out his hand. "Come on, there's something I want to show you." He led her to the parking lot, where a sleek electric car was parked with a giant red bow on top. Sarah blinked. "What is this?" "Your retirement gift," Ethan said, grinning. "Well, kind of. It's also your new adventure mobile, because I know you're not the type to sit still." She laughed, brushing a tear away. "I guess not." They climbed in and Ethan handed her the keys. "You sure you trust me behind the wheel again?" she teased. He smirked. "I learned from the best." As the car rolled out of the lot, Sarah glanced back at the building, its sign glowing in the early dusk. Second Chance Auto, built with love, driven by purpose. Her journey had begun with nothing but a broken car and a fierce love for her son. Now it ended, continued, with hundreds of journeys behind her and hundreds more waiting up ahead. Because the truth was this: sometimes the vehicle that carries us isn't just made of metal and wheels. Sometimes it's made of faith, of grit, of people who never gave up. And sometimes the most broken roads lead to the most beautiful destinations.